Welcome to the Sanity interview from the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week my co-hosts Rebecca Sugar and I will talk to the newsmakers that you want to hear from.
We're joined today by Jaclyn Lavy, an associate specialist at Sotheby's, who helped to launch the digital art department back in 2020. Jaclyn, we're really happy to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Since its inception, the department has generated over $220 million in sales in New York and Paris and Hong Kong and even most recently in Saudi Arabia. Jaclyn has played a key role in shaping Sotheby's digital strategy and driving the acceptance of cryptocurrency as a form of payment. And I think it's safe to say that this is a topic about which I know almost nothing, and Ari probably knows a little bit more than I do, but, I wouldn't call him an expert. Yeah. And we're really thrilled to dive in and find out and learn from you. So thanks for coming. And the first big question, which everyone wants to know the answer to, is what is digital art? Can you explain that to us?
As a general rule, it's when artists are using digital tools as to either get to the final result of the medium, or ultimately digital being the final output, the final product of their work. It's been around since the 1950s.
And then what are the subcategories of it that we need to understand, the major ones?
So I would start by saying that I think digital art is a subcategory of contemporary art. I think it's we all have our own markets, but this is definitely if someone's putting together a cohesive collection of art, I think it's important. It reflects science today. It reflects the culture today, all these kids on their phones and, on social media and all of that. So, technology and AI and code, it's all a part of our story in 2025. So now to go deeper into the different categories of digital art, the most, and I'm going to miss a ton, so I'll just give you kind of the ones that I've seen trend since my time at Sotheby's. Originally it was generative art. We have generative, we have AI art, we have pop digital, what I would call, and then we also have smart contract art. So that's artists actually using the blockchain to create something interesting, which one artist named Pat created a work called Fade. You sell the work, it's a full circle, and the circle starts to disintegrate until it's resold again, and then it goes back to its full form. So that's smart contract art.
Oh.
That's very cool. The questions around digital art seem to me very old questions about art in general, right? Is art new, or is it art? That's the oldest question, in the history of art, right? And so I think what's kind of super interesting about this is sort of, are these the same kind of questions as is a Duchamp art, or is it even the Jackson Pollock art? So I guess what I'm wondering here with this, how much is genuinely, do you feel as an expert, is genuinely new versus kind of new set of terms for sort of things that they're analogs from what came before?
So I would say blockchain obviously has allowed artists to be a little bit more experimental. So I don't think this is very new. I think, I'll give an example of generative art. So generative art is code-based art, and this guy named Eric, who goes by Snowfro, created a platform called Art Blocks. So what Art Blocks does is it allowed artists, because before this, if they wanted to do a generative art piece, it's they would have to run their code 1 million times, pick maybe their favorite works from every time they ran the code. Because with generative art, every time you run the code, you're going to get a different piece. So the beauty of generative art is when an artist can create an algorithm or a code that you can run it 1 million times, and you're always going to get a nice image output, is what I call it. And every time you run it, the output should look kind of cohesive enough that it's part of the same series, but every work should have enough diversity that it makes it interesting, that you feel like you're getting a unique piece. So really code-based art I find super, super interesting, and that's where you can trace it back to the 1950s and Vera Molnar and writing the code. And then there were no screens back then, so then she would plug her the code into a plotter and have to wait for the plotter to show her the image. So we're getting that at rampant speed now. So Eric created Art Blocks, and basically this allowed artists to put their code into his platform, and then it's almost a performance piece or, like a participatory piece, because us as the collectors, you click the mint button. So you're running the code and then you're not choosing what you get. Right. You're just running the code and participating in the experiment. And, it's almost like an experiment and getting the piece of the artwork.
And the code is designed, I'm assuming, then to never be replicable.
Yeah.
After you punch that button once, you create what you create. It cannot be recreated.
Exactly.
Do digital artists have to be coders in order to be in this space?
No.
Okay, so some of them are artists in the traditional way that we think about artists, and then they are either hiring someone to do a code that would reflect their artistic vision, or they are working with a robot. I saw one of the artists that you referred us to. So how does that work?
Like we mentioned before, there's so many categories of digital art. So code-based art is just one category, and so there's all these artists who were animators, illustrators for, big like Apple and all these big companies before. And so a lot of them kind of saw the opportunity with NFTs. They were like, wow, people are buying digital art online. Now I could have my own career and I don't really need to, work in the corporate world anymore, and I could support myself on this. So that's like one category. I would say that's like the pop digital artists. Then the code-based art, a lot of them come from coding backgrounds. So a lot of them are engineers. I think it's incredible with a lot of these digital artists too, because they've built they create the work, they build a community on Twitter or Discord or Instagram. Then they also manage their sales. Like there's not so many galleries that fully wrap their heads around what's going on that are able to actually like take these artists in and help them. So for most of it now, they've been handling everything themselves. So these guys are kind of like jacks of all trades. Yeah. AI-based work, they create the robot. So, sometimes when it's definitely the artist is the creator of the robot. So we try to make reference to who's the creator and then what have they created and then we also do give credit to the tools that they use. So like if they're using DALL-E or they're using, one of the like
what is
DALL-E? DALL-E is, I guess like text to image AI that you could even go online and like say, I want a picture of a dog flying next to pink clouds, and it will generate like multiple images of whatever you've put there. Yeah.
I'm really interested in that idea that somehow this this category of art is expanding the community of who's an artist, who are art consumers, where is the art being held. I remember in the Whitney Biennial last year, they just sort of dipped their toe in AI. I think there were 2 or 3 works that actually didn't look very different from more conventional art. But what about that? I mean, in the sense of like, at a certain level, the art market has gotten, I think, pretty small, at least at the very high end, in terms of who can bid on things or who can afford things. Do you see this as kind of like a democratizing movement? Is this opening up for more people to create art, to access art, to experience art? Or is it actually a very narrow coterie of people who have the technical skills to kind of even appreciate what's going on here?
So I think with every movement, it like kind of starts as a small group of people who then get very loud, and then it kind of filters into the rest of society. So, it is a very tight community of artists and creators. Like, even we were talking about pop digital, like Sam Spratt did Kid Cudi's album and did like a ton of like really interesting commercial work. And now he's created his own community, this whole gamified interaction with his community called The Masquerade. Like it is pretty niche, and you kind of have to be in it to be in the thick of it. But I would say since 2020, it's definitely grown. And like, I don't necessarily even think the goal is to merge into the traditional art scene. Like, I definitely think it's its own world. And I think as, Gen Z and all these like younger generations continue to grow up, they're going to have a deeper appreciation for this, just given how much time they spend on their phones and, in these digital worlds. I do think it is decentralized, to your point. Obviously, Sotheby's were centralized,
right. Yeah.
But I think it takes working together to give it the legitimacy that it deserves. So, Sotheby's will come in, we'll do, we did like an exhibition for Botto, an artist that is AI artist that is facilitated by a DAO, so a community of people that like help get to the final output. And, so that in itself is super interesting. And then it's like you need like a Sotheby's or a gallery to take this to the next level, do global exhibitions and do the proper storytelling with them and, elevate it to reach more people, I would say.
Who are at Sotheby's, who's coming to you to buy this kind of art generally? Is there a demographic? And I'm always curious just the ownership of it.
Yeah.
So if I buy a piece of digital art from Sotheby's and I have it on my little digital wallet that's set up for art, am I running around and showing all my friends like what I bought? Am I printing it out and putting it like on the wall, something that I just printed out of my own printer? Does the thing on the wall have any value? Or is it just the thing in my phone? What's the experience of ownership like, and who are those owners?
Our demographic of collectors is definitely on the younger side. So I would say 40 and under for the most part. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule, but I would say it's like people who are pretty tech savvy, either from the crypto world or the venture world. And a lot of the crypto people aren't as excited by the physical work.
Yes.
So like, maybe it's like a minimalist, like
Nobody
maybe the next gen. Nobody wants
stuff.
Things. What do you do with all these things,
Yeah.
So there's like a handful of people who like sometimes we even offer the physical work and they're like, it's okay. And it's not for me. But then it's interesting because I've been putting digital artworks in the Contemporary Discovery sale, which is like, we have the physical exhibitions, and I've been telling the artists, it would be great to put physical works alongside the digital just so you get exposure from a new audience. And so when we have those collectors come in, they're like, what digital? What wallet? What are you talking about?
Are they buying in crypto?
A lot of people are. Yeah, we do accept fiat for all of the transactions as well, but definitely we see a lot of people paying in cryptocurrencies.
And I get why an artist who works in digital would be annoyed about or reluctant to put something. It'd be like saying, like a portrait artist saying, well, put up a photograph of the picture next to it. I mean, there's something about, the medium, I guess that's important. But I'm curious about this, like the world of crypto and sort of, is it the kind of culture and art that it's kind of generating? Like you could tell a whole story about the 20th century and, the rise of finance and, the great industrialists and the sort of the founding of the Met and the Morgan Library. And especially being here in New York, it feels like our encounter with beautiful things and art is to a large extent like a Gilded Age legacy of, the big names, the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and the Morgans and things like that. Like, what is your sense of kind of how this newer emerging world is thinking about art or thinking about culture? Are they particularly excited by, buying and selling and looking at art that feels like it's familiar to them? Is there a kind of some hesitation about committing to art in general? What's kind of like the cultural vibe around the creation of these works?
So there's definitely like a ton of different communities even within the digital art sphere. Like there's a whole glitch community, and so like when your computer glitches, there's like a group of artists.
Wait, this is amazing. What is a glitch community?
So it's like when you get a glitch on your computer, it's basically artists that are excited by glitching the work, and like I'm trying to think of a good example. Like
the analog would be like when I was young and we had that big box that used to be called a television that sat on the floor and it was encased in wood, and it would have snow on it. Like
exactly.
It would be like making
like the blue
that
screen
all
of
the
death
time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one whole community, and then there's like the generative art community, and then there's the AI community, and then there's like the animators and the pop digital community. So like all of them have their own subcultures, even though like there's the general kind of excitement about like the computer and what it's capable of creating. And then there's the artists that are using like the robots and
Are traditional, what I'm calling traditional artists, trying to come over into this space? Is that a gap that they can get over? And is it successful when they do?
If an artist is actually super curious and excited about experimenting with the technology and, spends the time to get to know the collectors and the other artists in the space and really, isn't just doing it on like a surface level, then I think that translates very nicely, especially if their medium is already like conceptual. Like Vera, for example, obviously she was doing computer art, but she never had done a digital series. And we did that with her, and that translated super well because her ideas, her artwork is very process driven. So whether it was, writing the code or simply having a grid with 100 squares, having someone come into the room and pick a color and then coloring in one of the squares and then her responding to that by coloring another square in black. Like it's up to chance where that person was going to go color the square. So like that to me that's process, there's a process behind that. That is like generative by nature.
Yes.
And so it translated super easily to creating a generative series, and we partnered actually. It was her and Martin Grasser. I think I'm pronouncing his last name properly. He actually had created the first Twitter logo. And so, like all these guys come from commercial backgrounds and have been doing this for years.
Yes.
And they worked super nicely together, and the project's incredible. And we actually released it right before she turned 100, and then unfortunately she passed away, but it was the only project she's done.
Oh, extraordinary.
Yeah.
Give us a sense of what these works of art are selling for. What's the range here?
Massive range. I've been lucky enough since my time at Sotheby's to be a part of some like really, really incredible sales. So I would say we sold, I don't know if you guys are familiar with CryptoPunks. That was a big...
No, not entirely.
Okay,
I was actually the secret bidder.
So CryptoPunks were created in 2017. They were actually free to claim. It was a project of 10,000 profile picture collection generative pieces by this Matt and John, and they kind of have their umbrella company called Larva Labs, where they do a lot of tinkering around and experimentation. So this was like literally one of the first on-chain projects. Those are, so it's literally humans, and a lot of people identify as these humans. Like they'll buy a CryptoPunk, and that just becomes their persona, and like a lot of their aliases.
Is it like a cartoon image, or is it like, okay.
It's like a cartoon image, pixels. Uh-huh. So there's like 6529 and like all these funds or people who identify by their punk. So we sold the alien punk for almost $12 million, and there's only 9 alien punks, and this punk happened to have a mask on it, and this had like nothing to do with COVID, but it happened to be that this alien punk had the mask and kind of like really reflected the era that we were in at the time. Yeah. So people went crazy over that.
So without divulging any state secrets, like how did you, and back to Rebecca's question just about process, like how did you come into like possession of this? Or is it something that was, or not possession, but kind of where is it? I feel like we keep coming back to this sort of like, and so it's unique.
I'm trying to put it on the wall, you're saying?
You can't copy it. Is it like a file? Or like just an image?
A thumb drive?
Yeah.
What is it?
So back to the question about how to display and how to live with these things. A lot of the time people do print the works, and that is one form of display. Like there's, for generative work particularly, print or like pop digital, like those translate very nicely to print, I think.
But I think the question is even before the owner owns it, from the artist to you to the person who's
it's in your wallet.
It. Is it an email you're sending them? Right. Is it a WhatsApp?
So
what is it?
It is you're sending an NFT, a non-fungible token, and you send it from one wallet to the other. This non-fungible token has something called metadata, and that is immutable, unchangeable.
So that's what makes it unique. It's not the way it looks. It's like it's DNA.
It's DNA.
So I could like screenshot it but it wouldn't have that same
Exactly.
DNA. Okay.
I give like this example of, let's say you had digital currency, right? And it's like the double spend problem. And that's kind of like what blockchain solves. So it's like, if I have a digital $5 bill and you have a digital $5 bill, but I spent, like, how do you know whose is whose, who spent what? So if you now put it on the blockchain and you could see Jaclyn owns this $5 bill and now I'm sending it to Rebecca, and you see that I haven't spent any of it, it's like in its full form being sent, and you could see that it's being sent from me to you. So that's kind of, it solves the double spend problem.
Yes.
Now we can't both spend that $5 because we know who has it. So that's the same thing with this digital art. You can totally you can copy paste, you know, and have, you could also go and print it. You can access in the metadata, there's usually a link to the image file. So you could also access that and get a high resolution of the image, but you don't own it, you know? It's the same. And then people make the argument of like, well, then why is it unique if everyone can have it? But it's like the same with any artwork. You could forge an artwork, but it's not yours, you know? You could have a copy of the real one. So it's the same principle, I would say, in this digital world, where it's like you have the digital piece and you see the ownership in the wallet. People have online galleries that they could, like, you know, they flex there.
That's interesting. I was sort of curious about the flex. Right? You buy a Picasso, you don't stick it in your broom closet. You put it right in the front hall where everyone can see it. What's the front hall for digital art?
With CryptoPunks, I would say it's your profile picture. You know, like, it's kind of a flex if your profile picture is a punk. And now you're part of this group.
So social media is really the front hall.
In a lot of cases, yes. I would say as the market's maturing, obviously artists are also maturing and figuring out interesting ways to place the works in homes. And so as that continues to elevate, like if you look up Rafik Anadol, the way he displays his works are incredible. He was just at the MoMA. He had a huge installation there. Like that, to live with that is absolutely incredible. And so artists are coming up with interesting ways to live with it. A lot of people are super happy to have their punk on the wall or their Fidenza on the wall and live with that.
Yeah.
But
so it's at $12 million at the high end of the market.
Definitely.
Back to pricing, and we're going all the way down to whatever. I mean, what's Sotheby's range?
We do, obviously our specialty is like the highest end. Yeah. But, you know, we honestly tackle all ends of the market. In the discovery sale, I actually try, because there's not so many galleries yet that are onboarding these artists into the space, what I try and do is pick maybe 10 to 15 younger digital artists that I think there's a lot of potential with, and I'll invite them to place a work in our discovery sale. And so we have a ton of foot traffic in the building and just, you know, get new buyers familiarizing themselves with the work. So that's like probably on the lower end. But then, you know, on the high end, like I said, like we just sold a Rafik for almost $1 million in Saudi Arabia. So in the inaugural auction. So we really are at like there's just so much room in this space because there's not that many players yet. And
Right.
I ask you just personally, how did you get interested in this?
Of course. So I'm a nerd, and I'm like, I was like on my computer all the time in college.
Did you study art history, or did you study CS, or did you?
No, none of the above. I studied philosophy, politics, and economics. I concentrated in choice and behavior. And so when I heard about crypto when I was a junior in college, and I was like, what is this? And started just day trading. And that's when I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And that's when I learned about blockchain, and I learned about this whole idea of decentralization, and then started at Sotheby's in early 2020, and a lot of my friends had been trading NBA Top Shot cards. And so I was kind of like, okay, what's going on here? This is super interesting. Then I realized also it was all people my age trading these, and I was kind of like, like at this point I wasn't necessarily an art specialist yet, and so my brain was more thinking on like the business development side. Here's an opportunity for us to engage with a whole new group of people. And then Michael Buhana was in London at the time, and he was an art specialist, and he ran the day sale there. And he was like, there are a ton of really interesting artists here. Like, this is incredible. So they connected the two of us, and I've been his right hand since.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we've been building the department, and it is a totally new group of collectors, which is super interesting and super fun. And they have such cool taste and ideas, and they're all brilliant because all these guys are like tech entrepreneurs and super deep in the crypto sphere and AI world and venture world. The complexity of what they're doing, like I tried to write code and do a generative project, and it's so difficult. Like for them to make like a circle in code, I tried to do that. I was like, this is so hard to do. So the fact that you guys are making these like gorgeous outputs, and even just like drawing on my computer, it's so hard, you know?
Yeah.
So there's just a ton of talented people, and I think it was very hard to exhibit and sell digital art, and so this kind of facilitated the whole thing. And
has the Trump administration's focus on crypto and these conversations, has that had any impact on the market? Are more people interested now than before, or is it hard to tell because just the whole industry is?
Crypto is obviously a lot more than just art, right? That's
Yeah.
a great question. Is like those macro trends. Are you feeling them kind of with what you do?
Yeah.
I would say it's still pretty strong, our market. Like the high quality works are still selling. And it's just like, you know, with every kind of bump in the road, there's always consolidation. And so I think of it as like maturing, you know, because we're so young as a group. Like I think whenever they call it a bear run in the crypto world. So whenever there's a bear run, I think it gives people more time to like think and actually build and keep their heads down. And, you know, every time there's this type of dip in the market, where we have them quite often because crypto is so volatile, there's always such interesting projects, and like, you know, there's new companies that develop that are supporting the ecosystem. So I haven't seen like a drastic impact on artists creating or collectors' interest levels. But even, you know, when it's a little bit slower, there's more innovation that comes from it. So it's better ultimately for everyone.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to tell us a bit about what's coming up in terms of sales at Sotheby's and shows, and what people can look out for, and maybe just give us some sense of where they can learn more and dig into more of some of what we just talked about?
Absolutely. So we actually have Hong Kong sales coming up. Those are the contemporary sales. And then I'll just give you guys everything that's cool that's coming up. So there's the contemporary Hong Kong day and evening auction. Then actually the sports and memorabilia department is selling, I think, Jordan's rookie jersey and
Very
like
cool.
a rookie card. So that'll be really interesting. And then in April, we have digital art day sale. So that'll be a really interesting opportunity here in New York. There's no physical exhibition for that sale, but we will have exhibitions in July, and then hopefully a few works displayed in November as well. But there's always, you know, our space moves very, very quickly, so there's always something going on. And if anybody has any questions about what's going on in our space, then they can absolutely reach out to me. And I'm very active on Twitter. That's where most of the action happens. So,
Great.
yeah.
Jaclyn Lavy, thank you so much for joining us.
Jaclyn,
course.
thanks.